there's been enough bad information online about boosters that are in the 750 Edelbrock carburetors. Are they different? Are they the same? What's the difference between the manual electric choke carburetors? Well, we're going to take a look at find out today. Several months ago, we did a video on the 1406 carburetor and why it's not really a performance carburetor. And while I think we covered that topic pretty well, I did notice that there is quite a bit of chatter online about the 1407 and a little confusion about what the difference is between the electric and manual choke carburetors. And there is quite a big difference between the two. Now, I read all sorts of comments that there's no difference in them. The only thing that's different in it is the rods and the jets in it. The boosters are the exact same. Everything else is the exact same between those carburetors other than the tuning chart. And while that sounds good, it's really not the case at all. So today we're going to talk about how those are different and why the booster is a little bit different. So let's get all these out of the way except for these ones here on the bottom that are specific to the 1407 and the 1411 carburetor. Let's quickly take a look at something. In the Edelbrock catalog, if you flip to the page with the 750 and the 600 CFM carburetor, there's a couple of interesting things on here to take note of. If you look at the 600 CFM listing for the electric choke, in the 1406, it says right there, calibrated for fuel economy. If you look at the 1405, the manual choke, it says it is calibrated for performance. When you look at the 750, same thing. This is the 1407 calibrated for performance. Electric choke 1411 calibrated for economy with performance. Well, what does that mean exactly? Why does one say it's calibrated for performance and the other one says it's calibrated for fuel economy? And to understand that, you have to understand how these are sold primarily. If you go to any auto parts store here in the U.S., especially the big ones, Advance Auto, O'Reilly, AutoZone, they all carry that Performer Series carburetor in the 500, the 600, and the 750. These are universal carburetors, so when somebody walks in with a 81 GMC truck and they need a replacement carburetor for the very expensive Quadrajet, a lot of times the counter person or the customer will say, well, I will take a look at a universal one, give me one that's in the same size or close to it, and give me one with an electric choke on it. The reason why they're calibrated for fuel economy in that case is so the customer doesn't lose all of the fuel economy that a factory OE style carburetor will give them. So the electric choke carburetors are more calibrated for that direct replacement or universal replacement for a old carbureted application. That's the primary reason behind it. Now, having an electric choke version and a manual choke version, it just really kind of depends. Now, I always run electric choke where I'm at. On a street car, it's just easier to start. Even in the summertime, when you get a cool morning of 65, 60 degrees, something like that, the choke is still going to operate a little bit and help the thing get warmed up a little bit quicker. But the manual choke carburetor is certainly calibrated for performance, and the electrics are calibrated for fuel economy. But that's what we're going to concentrate on today. That's what we're going to look at in the boosters to see why those two are different and how they're different and where we get that, or where Edelbrock gets that saying of that it's calibrated for economy with performance or calibrated for performance only. So let's take a look at that. We'll look at the boosters and we'll talk about those individually. So in the 750 CFM carburetor, you got the 1407, 1411. These are the two part numbers and the actual boosters out of both those carburetors. Now, if you go to my Muscle Car Solutions carburetor website, in the resource section, there is a free download of all of the part numbers of the carburetor and the corresponding booster that comes in the primary and the secondary, and even included some of the discontinued carburetors. Why is that important? Well, you can kind of just quickly look at it and see that there are some of these carburetors that are the same CFM that have different booster part numbers. If you look to 1405 and 1406, they are completely different. 1407 and 1411, they are different on the primary side. Now, when you get to the secondary side on the 1411 and 1407, they are exactly the same. So it's the primary booster that is different in those two carburetors. When you look at the 1406 and the 1405, This gets interesting because it's the primary and the secondary booster that is different in that carburetor. And we can cover that one more in depth at some other time. But I just wanted to show you this real quickly. If you want to download this for free, you can. You don't have to sign up, don't have to give an email address, stuff like that. But it is a useful document to have. We've talked about Edelbrock carburetor boosters quite a bit, but when you look at the top side of the carburetor or the top side of the booster, at the very top in this flat area right here, or right on top, the part number of the booster is stamped. It's on every single one, but sometimes it's in one or two of those locations. Generally, they will stamp it right here on the top because it's easier, but this little flat spot on the bottom, sometimes they will stamp it down here. But that will at least tell you and give you the easy way to identify which booster it is, especially if you're rebuilding a lot of these and taking it apart and you forget what booster goes back into what carburetor. That's the easy way of identifying what part number they are. One other resource on the carburetor website is you will find the tuning chart that Edelbrock puts out, and within there you will find both those part numbers that are in there, 1407, 1411. The first one's just a chart. We've talked about how to read that, and the second one is the actual table with all the part numbers of what comes in that kit. And you can quickly take a look at it and see that the main jet and the metering rods are different almost down the line with this one. So there's something completely different between those two carburetors, but that's another indication of what you can look at. But the CFM is the exact same size between the two. It's hard to just arbitrarily add a rod and jet combination to lean it out if you're just trying to do it by CFM. You've got to do something so that the rod and jet will work in conjunction with the main metering system within the carburetor, and how that's delivered is through the booster. And if the booster is the exact same between the two, then it is really difficult to kind of lean and change those out very dramatically. And that's why we know that these are there is a change in booster here, because these tuning charts are vastly different between each other. There are some components to both these sets of boosters that are the same. So when you look at the top side of the booster, this main well bleed tube is the exact same size on all four of these boosters. So we know that that's not the difference in it. The main nozzle that comes out of here, that orifice and that size, that tube that's running through there is the exact same size in all four of these. These bypass bleeds, and we'll put a pin gauge in all this just to verify it, but this bypass bleed, the little economizer bleed, channel restrictor that's in there, those are all the exact same size. So what's different in it? That's what we're going to measure today, and they're both on the bottom side of this. So when you look at the bottom side of this, is you've got this jet tube here and this emulsion tube, and they are completely different when you look at them. So let's put them side by side and show you an example so we can see what they physically look like, and then let's pin gauge that and see what size that is. So when you put these boosters side by side, you can kind of start to see a little bit of difference here between these emulsion tubes that come out, and one is obviously a little bit longer. This one's got a squared off end, this one's got a rounded end. We roll it over on the bottom, we can see that that import, or that port going into that emulsion, is much different. It's much smaller on the 1411 carburetor than it is the 1407, and that's big because that's where your main fuel pickup is coming out of that out of the bowl, which is fed by the jet, and the the metering rod and the jet. That fuel that gets passed there is what gets passed into here. So that fuel is metered, and then it's metered again there. So the 1411 is significantly smaller. So having that big open well is certainly different. Now, if you also look here, you've got all these little holes that are in here. They are in some different locations or different sizes. And again, that makes a big difference because it just means how much fuel and how much air is going to get metered through here, because remember, you're also metering air out of the top side of this booster. That's what references and sticks up out of the top of the air horn assembly. That's why you have to get these in there correctly. These both happen to be for the passenger side of the carburetor, but again, when you're looking at just the differences in these boosters, it is very, very different between how that fuel is picked up. So you're going to flow more volume with this with the 1407 just because of the amount of holes that it has in it and that big opening on the bottom. You're very restrictive on the 1411. Now, here's the big one. And this jet tube here is going to be different sizes. So let's get the pin gauge out and we'll start measuring it to see what actual sizes those are. Okay, let's get one of these measured up here. So again, we're going to work on the jet here and see what size it is. Now, I can't remember exactly where I was. I think maybe it's a 40 or a 41. Let's try the 41 first and see if it fits in here. No. Okay, it's gonna be a 40, I'm guessing then. Kind of feeling a little like it wants to go. Let's see here. Yeah. It's tight, but it's in there. So 0.040. We can verify that, I guess. Yeah, well, 41 didn't really fit, so I think I'm pretty comfortable. And I mean, it's tight, but it's going in there. So okay. So we know that it's a 40. Now, we can check that right away. That's the 1411. Let's grab one of these from the 1407. And the 40, I do not believe will go in here. Yeah, it's not even picking up in the... Okay. Nope. Okay. So we know that that jet is a 0.040. Now let's see what size that jet is here. I've measured these before and I don't... Is it 36? I don't know. Let's find out. No, 36 is too loose. You can kind of feel it if it wiggles back and forth. So let's try a 37. Try a 37 and see if we're... Oh yeah. We also need to verify that. So let's put the calipers on there. It's exactly a 37. So we know that the pin is right. So let's try a 38 for giggles. That way we can verify that. 38. Yep. It's not even really catching on there. There's a little bit, but it's I can't push it in there without it's not going. It's that little mouth on there might be a little widened a little bit, but I can't get that to work its way in there. So we know then that jet size is an 037. Now, is that a big enough difference between it? Oh, you better believe it is, because that amount of additional flow out of that is very significant. Now, why would the 1411 be different than the 1407. And you also have to take into consideration that those jet and that emulsion down there is really fed by the air bleed. So the larger the air bleed, the more air that goes in there that mixes in with the fuel that comes out of the booster. It's not just a pure fuel mixture that comes out of the nozzle here in the booster. It's an air and fuel mixture. That's why you've got all these idle or all these air bleeds that are on here, because that's what they're designed to do, is mix in with the different channels that are in there to make sure that it gets a good combination of fuel and air. So that emulsion tube and that jet are certainly key to doing it. So when you're calibrating these for a certain amount of air and fuel, or economy in this case, you're going to make that a little bit different than you are on the one that's more calibrated for performance. Now remember, the emulsion is much bigger on that one versus the 1411. So very, very different between the two. Very different in how they're calibrated. Again, we can take a look at, let's go ahead and measure that bypass bleed. I don't know what that is. Let's try to start at the end of a row here. Let's try that 43. It may be a little too big. Nope, it's way too small. I knew they were fairly large. Let's try 50. We can verify that. So 50 might be a little. 50 might be a little loose. Let's see if a 51 will go. Oh, I think it might be a 50. Okay. Now, if that's the case, then all of these will fit the 50 on this little bypass bleed. Goes up at an angle. See that? Yep, we'll see how it goes in there. That one was tight. This one is certainly tight as well. Again, very tight. So, cool. So, that gives us what we need. So now we know what the differences is on those boosters between a 1407 and a 1411. Now I thought about cutting this apart so we could run a larger pin down there, but I know that these are the same size and I'd rather not ruin a set of boosters. These are not easy to come by because they have to be scrapped out of a core, and I don't want to create a core with the only 1407 and 1411 carburetor that I have. So anyway, that should cover, or at least give you the idea of what the differences are here between these two boosters. They're very, very different on the emulsion tube. That jet size is significantly different between the two, and absolutely does that make a big difference. Now again, some of those other measurements are the same between the two, but that's enough between the fuel pickup and that jet that really that jet tube that really dictates how much fuel or how much fuel and air flows through those boosters into the main metering system. So very, very critical here. They are not the same. They are completely different when you talk about how much they're going to flow. And the 1411 is absolutely more calibrated for fuel economy, and that's why in the chart you've got such a wide variance of rods and jets between those two tuning charts between the 1407 and 1411. It's because the booster is metering a little bit different fuel. So at the rod and jet that feeds that channel to get into that main metering circuit has to look different. It's not just a rod and jet change. Those are They absolutely are, but you can't have just a rod and jet change without changing how it's being delivered downstream. That's where the final thing is made here, the final way of delivering that fuel is made is in the boosters there. So I hope that clears up a little bit of the differences between those two. It's really the nice thing about carburetors or pistons or rocker arms or whatever it is you're looking at. There's a way to verify what that information is, and if it's something that is correct, incorrect, it's accurate, whatever you got in the box is correct. There's always a way to kind of measure it and determine if you've got the right thing, you're using the right thing, or kind of dispute some of that stuff that's online. That argument on the 1407, 1411, and the 1405, 1406 comes up every couple of years, and people get kind of spooled up on what's what in it, and yes, this is correct, no, it's not correct. Well, my buddy says, or I've measured it 1,000 times, I know it's right. Well, there's an easy way to verify all that. Grab yourself those carburetors, pull them out, and do the measures yourself. If it's on metering rods or jets or the emulsions or the air bleeds, all those things are easily measurable. These tools aren't that expensive. The pin gauge is a little bit more awkward, I guess, because you're not going to use it every day, but that $30 investment for that, or you can spend a couple $100 for a full kit, but they're certainly worth it, because then you can actually measure what's going on here. You can verify, hey, that's not right. That information that I saw online was incorrect. So I hope that answered at least the questions on this, and why that 1407 and 1411 is so different, and why Edelbrock calls the 1407 a performance calibration and the 1411 a performance and economy calibration. So if you have any questions about this one, don't hesitate. Please leave them down below. If you have any other questions that you've seen, or things that people are talking about online that you're not quite sure of, that you want me to kind of measure out and put to the test on these Edelbrock carburetors, I'm more than happy to do that as well. But hopefully I've got enough information out there in some past videos. At least we can get through some of the muck that's out there. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope you guys understand or got something out of the differences between the two. It's not that big of a deal. You can still tune that 1411 to make some good power out of it. You're just restricted a little bit by the booster. Now, we can talk about that at a later date, but these boosters can be modified, but when you modify them, you're done. You can't put them back. So that's a topic we'll cover maybe on a future video. But anyway, leave your questions down below. And yeah, hope you enjoyed that one. We'll catch you guys on the next one. We'll see you.